Jesus calls us his sheep, but sheep are dumb. I don't know what that says about us. And it doesn't take much to startle a sheep, to harass their calm state. I watched this video the other day in which a rabbit learned from a sheepdog to corral sheep on a farm. Watch for just a moment. Now watch our hero. He's a constant guard. It doesn't take much to nip at their heels. It doesn't take much to harass them. It's a lot of little things. The shepherd carried a staff. Now, it not only redirected the heads of sheep beginning to wander, but the staff was used to clear the path of critters that threatened to harass the steps that led them from pasture to pasture. It churned within Jesus' heart when he saw the crowds. Jesus looked upon the lives of people and saw them harassed and helpless with the cares of life. Their hope rested on the care of the Good Shepherd. Friends, this same clarity of sight is the marker of a healthy church. There are people each of us encounter every day, friends and relatives, associates and neighbors who are struggling with the harassment and the cares of this life. They're living in the fields of the lies of culture. They're wandering helplessly down a pathway, not to fulfillment, but brokenness and ultimate ruin. The psalmist declared, "For the Lord watches over the path of the godly, but the path of the wicked leads to destruction." When Christ followers look around them, when they view the lives of people outside of a faith relationship with Jesus, is there such clarity? Do they see through the eyes of Jesus? Do we? Do they view people who are harassed and helpless as they encounter life? Do they see people who are hurting, living in brokenness, headed down a pathway towards heartbreak? Are their hearts breaking for them? In compassion. Does our hearts break? Is it compelling each of us to action, driving church ministries and hearkening us to our knees when we see clearly? When Christ followers look at people through the eyes of Jesus, it has to be transformational. Well, there is a second factor that comes to light from this passage as well. We read it earlier from verse 37 of the text. It says, "Then he said to his disciples, 'The harvest is plentiful.'" Now, let that sink in for just a moment. When Jesus looked out into the broken world around him, when he focused on the fate of the flock, he didn't see adversity. Rather, he saw opportunity. Christ follower, church family, when you look around you, today's society, do you see opportunity? Or have you pretty much written off our culture as unredeemable? I was reading excerpts from an interview with Lee Strobel the other day. Do any of you know who Lee Strobel is? A new movie based on his life has recently been released. It's called The Case for Christ. Lee, who is a former investigative journalist in Chicago and an atheist, set out through an investigative process to prove that Christianity was false. Instead, the facts led his investigation to become a believer and now a pastor. He noted more and more people are growing weary of our materialistic and celebrity-saturated culture and instead finding exhilaration in Jesus. The proliferation of ministries that help the hurting, feed the hungry, replace despair with hope. Addicts rescued, broken families put back together, racial reconciliation, selflessness displaying self-interest. While some churches are closing, many of those with a relevant and biblically faithful message aren't just growing, they're burgeoning. And he went on to say, let me share a little secret. In our increasingly chaotic world, the Christian message of truth and grace continues to resonate among people who are tired of the shifting sands of postmodern relativism. No doubt about it. Count me among those who are optimistic about the future of the church in America. Jesus looked out on the crowds and said to his followers, the harvest is plentiful. Now there's another occasion recorded in John chapter 4 where Jesus looked out on a group of Samaritans, a throng of them coming from a village to see him. As the story goes, his disciples had just returned from the village to bring lunch. Their concern was not the crowds of people coming, but rather the lunch that they had brought back. Jesus said, you don't understand. My food is those things that God has me to do. And they said, well, who gave him something to eat already? Now they're worried about their McDonald's in a bag. The Subway they brought back. They're concerned with this little thing right before them when there are throngs of people coming their way. Jesus said, I tell you, open your eyes. There's another translation that just says, lift up your eyes. Take it off your sack lunch and look at what's really important. Look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest. Opportunity abounds right before your very eyes. There are people who are longing to find satisfaction for what yearns within them. They are seeking purpose beyond the daily grind of living each day. They are looking for connection with people who care about them. So, what does Christ Church have to offer? It is the very antidote for their yearnings. Think about what the church offers. We offer to introduce them to Jesus so that they can have their sins forgiven, a purpose for living, and a home in heaven. That sounds good, doesn't it? We offer hope, family, a cause greater than self. My friends, the time has come for God's people to open their eyes and look at the fields. Opportunity is all around us, if we'll look. Jesus looked upon the crowds and remarked that the harvest is plentiful. Yet pause for a moment and consider who it was on the receiving end of those remarks. Then he told who? You can go ahead and talk to me, it's all right. Who? He said to what? Who? His disciples. He spoke to his disciples. Now this is who he's talking to. That there's an opportunity of it. The harvest is plentiful. Now this gives us an uncanny view into the third truth about what Jesus sees and challenges our own sight. Now, there may never have been a less likely group of people to seize on the opportunity that Jesus observed that day than his disciples. You might say that these men were not cut from the fabric of society's finest. They were not even seen in a deeply positive light by the religious leaders of their day. Historians reveal that the highest honor to be placed upon a young man in the Hebrew culture was to be chosen as an apprentice, a student, a follower of a rabbi. So kids would gather every year, and they would wait in a throng, and they would wait to be chosen to become a student. To be invited into the training of a rabbi was the pinnacle of status to which all male children aspired. However, most didn't make it. Most were turned away. And they were simply told, go back and apply the trade of your families. Maybe one day you'll be blessed enough that one of your children will be chosen as a student, as a disciple. Someday, one of your children may make the grade, but you don't cut it. Now consider the followers of Jesus. While adolescent boys sought out the acceptance of a rabbi, the followers of Jesus had already been rejected by the church. They were what? Fishermen? Common laborers applying the trade of their father's craft. When Jesus called Simon and Andrew and John and James, what were they doing? They were working in the boats. They left Levi, their father. They hadn't made the grade religiously. One might read that James and John and Andrew and Peter just walked away from their fishing nets in the family business and wonder how they could have so easily left their livelihoods behind them. An unbelievably high honor, an unheard of distinction had bestowed upon them. A rabbi sought them out. Can you imagine your daddy in a coffee shop the next morning? Hey, you know my boys? Yeah, you know, one's fisherman. Hey, rabbi came, chose them. Sitting around here, he's bragging rights. My boy got called by a rabbi. He came to them. The ones back in the church, they missed it. The rabbi chose them. They're following him. You see, the eyes of Christ perceive potential where others may not. Not only had these men already been turned away by the Hebrew rabbis, some of them had a bit of a checkered reputation. Matthew was a tax collector. He was the dregs of society. He is seen as a traitor of his people to the Romans. He was viewed with disdain by culture. He made a vocational choice that made him scorned among his fellow Hebrews. Nevertheless, Jesus saw potential in him and called him from the tax collector's booth. And without hesitation, Matthew left and followed Jesus. The same can be said of many of Jesus' inner circle. The Bible tells us, I love this, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, to them he gave them the name Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. Have you ever known any sons of thunder? These are guys with, big hairy knuckles just looking for a fight. They belly up to the bar not to drink, just to look for trouble. Look just to be pushed. Jesus saw potential. He knew the brothers' nature when he first met them. They had a tendency to be hotheads. They were rough and tough fishermen, not really what might have seemed an obvious first choice to represent God. But Jesus saw potential in them as transformational members of the movement his coming established. Another of Jesus' followers was Simon, known as Simon the Zealot. He was possibly a freedom fighter, one on high alert for the coming Messiah to lead the Hebrews to freedom. He was one looking for a fight, a revolution to overthrow the Roman stranglehold on Israel. Jesus saw potential in Simon. A revolution indeed was coming. It would throw off the chains that had encumbered the hearts of humankind. The point is, Jesus saw potential in these men. Those in whom he would entrust the continuation of his ministry upon returning to the Father. Jesus saw potential in these men as world changers. He saw their potential in grace. They may not have seen it. Society didn't see it. In Acts chapter 4, the Bible tells us how they were viewed by society. When they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished. And they took note that these men had been with Jesus. When you look in the mirror, what do you see? When you think about yourself, what is your perception? Maybe you've been told you lack what it takes. You can't ever amount to much. It could be that you look at life and you see that you've made some bad choices. And there's no way that God could use someone like you. Well, let me let you in on just a little secret. The same eyes that looked at this ragtag group of men looks at you today. Christ perceives potential. He knows all about you. He knows you better than you. The Bible tells each of us, for we are what? Thank you. There's one. I want you to say that out loud. I am God's masterpiece. Oh, that was really weak. We can do better than that. I am God's masterpiece. That's right. Hang on to that. Underline that. Circle that. Highlight it. Whatever you have to do. You're not junk. You're not an afterthought. I have been made by the